Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 26th of June 2021, and again I thank Kevin Moore for the work he's doing with his own YouTube channel and the current series, which is ever expanding, called They Call Us Channelers. Interesting stuff. Please do visit his site. It's he's got some remarkable people he's interviewing, and as I always say, check out the quality, because some of them are brilliant and some of them are at different levels, and that's fine, because we all need our levels to work with, and there's nothing wrong with working at certain levels, whether we're starting or whether we're advanced. It doesn't matter. Okay, so this particular satsanga is really about recognizing who and what we are. So let's have a look at the agenda for today. So first is there's a short talk on how to help each other recognize that we're all one, that they are us and we are them. That's very important, because that will change our perception and how we interact with each other. The next part of it is the questions, and there's quite a few questions this time. Not as much as last time, but that's okay, because we don't have lots and lots of questions all the time, but it's good to have some deep searching questions. And some of these questions, although there's sort of only halfway last time, are very deep questions, so I think it's going to be just as long in terms of the answers. And then the last 15 minutes or so is our meditation, and it's again a meditation to support the lecture. So it's how to feel oneness within each other, and how to sort of feel each other from a global perspective. Okay, so how to help each other recognize that we're all one. Well, firstly, you can't preach to somebody. That's the most important thing, because when we start to preach to somebody, they switch off, and any chances you had of helping them observe themselves as being basically a soul in a body, and that we're all souls who are on the journey of evolution to support our true energetic selves, evolutionary progression, and therefore the source, and therefore the origin, is going to fall on rough ground. So what we should do really is really start with ourselves, and the way to start with ourselves is to sort of just feel how we like to be, just feel how we like to interact with our environment, just feel how we want to be treated, and therefore we start to recognize that if we want to be treated in a certain way, a nice way, a benevolent way, a loving and caring and sharing way, then that's how we should treat others as well. And so what we need to do that is to just walk the talk. Basically, treat people with respect. Treat what they own with respect. Treat what they do with respect. Even if it goes against our ideals, just recognize that they are struggling. They are souls incarnate into a body, a human body, a vehicle, that allows them to interact with a low frequency environment that is so low in frequency that the communicative bandwidth that we normally have with our true energetic self and our normal environment, and of course source, is so slow that it feels like we're cut off from it. I keep saying that being here is like trying to communicate with each other by using two baked bean cans held together with string, whereas what we're normally used to is the fastest broadband in the world that can access every perceivable piece of information in the internet concurrently. And that's the sort of difference between what we are normally and what we're experiencing here. So we should be compassionate about people. I know it's difficult sometimes when people are bank robbers or are murderers or are conspiracy theorists or are churchgoers. All of these different people we sometimes don't like or prefer not to like, but they're all doing their evolutionary cycle. They're all doing their incarnation in a way which is sort of relevant to the circumstance they find themselves in, which does include being programmed by their parents and by their peer group and by their circumstances. So all we need to understand is that they are a separate soul in a body that's experiencing something in a profoundly different way to ourselves, or a minor way, the way that is in a minor way to ourselves. But at the end of the day, they're evolving. And as they're evolving because of their experience, which could be what we consider to be good or bad, or better than us or worse than us, or more of a challenge than us or less of a challenge than us. They are evolving as we are. Now, if we think of it in terms of the overall hierarchical structure of sentience that is the greater reality, the origin individualized an amount of its sentience to create the source entities. The source entity, or our source entity, other source entities did different things, but so read Beyond the Source books 1 and 2 to understand what they've done. But our source entity individualized a percentage, a large percentage of itself, about half of its structure, to create an individualized environment that it obviously is part of, but it doesn't interact with, other than letting smaller individualized units of itself go into that environment and experience all aspects of it. Not just experience the environment, but experience the interaction with other smaller individualized units of its sentience whilst in that environment. And so if you think about the source entities are an individualized or a differently apportioned. I think individualized is probably better, actually. It's an individualized unit of sentience from the origin, and that our true energetic selves, which we sometimes call our oversoul, we sometimes call it our higher self, we sometimes call it our Godhead, is again a smaller individualized unit of sentience from the source. And our soul, well, I'm told to call the aspect, a smaller aspect of the sentience of our true energetic self, is again part of that Godhead or oversoul or true energetic self. And subsequently, when we create shards, again it's a subset, an individualization of that sentience. So looking at it all from an individualization, and therefore a subset of the sentience, all the way down the line from origin to us as souls to our sub-souls, which are the shards, they are all effectively source and effectively origin. So if they're individualized from a bigger unit of sentience, then it's part of that sentience. And so when you consider that, then you start to realize that, or one starts to realize that each soul that is incarnate, each aspect of sentience that is incarnate, is ultimately part of a bigger unit of sentience. And so we are all one. It's just that we're individualized for a temporary moment, in this instance, to experience, learn and evolve by being in a particularly difficult environment to interact with, low frequency, which means that we are losing the vast majority of our functionality and our communicative ability. And when we start to realize that we're all doing the same thing, we're all on the evolutionary path, we can then sort of start to understand that we're all doing it in our way, and that every aspect of experience is important. You know, from every angle, it's unbalanced to always have the good stuff. It's unbalanced to always have the bad stuff. Those souls that choose hard incarnations are really, really brave souls, but they gain evolutionary content as a result of it, significant evolutionary content. So the question is, from people, I can hear it now, so how does a murderer evolve? Because they experience the process of becoming the murderer, of interacting with the soul that's agreed to be murdered. And then we say, well, as a human being, why would we possibly want to be murdered? Because it's part of an experience. Why would we possibly want to die through disease? Because it's an experience. When we're in the human condition, when we're in this particular body, this vehicle, on a temporary basis, we go through a process of detachment because of the low frequencies, which creates a temporary personality that we call the ego. And it's the ego that we exist with whilst we're incarnate. When we become disincarnate, when the body finally dies because it's worn out, or it's got disease, or it's been involved in an accident of some sort, then we start to become more connected again, and we start to realize that we're the sum of our incarnations, we're the sum of our experiences, And when we re-commune with our true energetic self, with the sum of all of the experiences of all of the aspects or souls that are projected out from that true energetic self. And so we start to then realise that we're part of a much bigger environment. We're not the drop of water anymore, we are the ocean. And it's the same with the human body. You know, our cells, our atoms, the electrons, the leptons, which are the quarks, the strangers and charms, all of these different levels of structure that create our human form, they're individualised units, but they all group together to create the human body. And so when you realise that these small units are all part of the one thing, all cells are part of a bigger organ, and the organ is part of the body, then it should be quite an easy step to realise that our sentience is part of a bigger level of sentience. And if that sentience is part of an ultimately bigger area of sentience, then just like the atoms or even the cells in the body becoming are actually an important part of the body, so they're one with the body, then so is our sentience one with the larger aspect of sentience. So when we start to realise this, that we're all functioning on a very minute level to experience the minute detail of being in a very difficult environment that produces a significant level of evolutionary progression, because it's difficult, it's extremely difficult, it's the hardest environment that we have to experience and therefore learn and evolve in, then we can be compassionate with other individuals. We stop seeing them as a human body, and we start seeing them as a soul. We start seeing them as another aspect of sentience that's occupying a vehicle to experience the environment they're in. It's like us getting into a motor car. We might have a Rolls Royce, we might have a Mini, we might have a Ford Escort, we might have a Maserati. Actually, the vehicle doesn't matter. It's the sentience that matters. And so when we start to understand this, the sentience that matters, we can start to understand that these different levels of sentience are experiencing different things, because that's the way they're contributing towards the overall evolution progression of their true energetic self and source. So we start to realise that yes, we are one with each other, and it doesn't matter what the body type is. When we understand this, we don't go around the discrimination road, because we know we're all souls. The body's just the body. It's just something that we're all clamouring for to enter into, to experience this low frequency environment, to gather significant amounts of evolutionary progression. Irrespective of what we end up doing, it's all experience, it's all learning, and it's all progression. And when we go back into the energetic and we see that this moment, this minuscule moment in existence in this location has achieved what it has achieved, it doesn't matter whether we've died of cancer, whether we've died of a virus, whether we've been involved in a horrific plane crash or car crash, whether we've been exposed to some drug gang, for instance, that's murdered us because we've observed them trading money for drugs. It doesn't matter. It's the experience that counts. And this is the issue with thinking of ourselves as the human body. We don't see the bigger picture. We don't see that all things are acceptable to source. All things are experienced to source, and we're experiencing it on behalf of the source because we're smaller units of source. And if we're all smaller units of source, we are the source, irrespective of who we are, irrespective of the body that we're in. The body's only a transient condition that we hire the body, so to speak, to use it to interact with this low frequency environment. It's like hiring a wetsuit or a diving suit to go into the water. We normally exist in a higher frequency environment, the air, and we hire a diving suit or some diving equipment, an aqualung, to go into a lower frequency environment, the water. It's the same thing. So once we understand this, we know that we're all one. We know that we are just experiencing things just to progress it from an evolutionary perspective. And sometimes we do experience hard incarnations, but we've chosen to do it. Sometimes we experience extremely privileged incarnations because we've chosen to do it. We choose to do what we're doing because it's providing us diversity of experience, depth of experience, depth of evolutionary progression and the quality of evolutionary progression. And everybody's doing that. They're not being a certain person in a certain body with a certain career, or not, as the case may be. They're just experiencing. And once we start to understand this, we can love each other in a rather profound way, because we're all here as, in a big adventure, in a big exploration, an exploration of experiencing low frequency existence and interacting with others who are also just as blind as ourselves, experiencing it as well. So that's the way to recognise that we're all one, really, is to recognise that we're not the human form, we're sentience. And that sentience is part of a larger body of sentience, and that sentience is part of a larger body of sentience, which ultimately is part of the larger body of sentience we call the origin. And we're all part of it, so we're all one. So when you think of bad things about another soul, or good things about another soul, just think that, hang about, that soul's me. Ultimately. Why am I thinking bad about myself or good about myself? Just think neutrally. Just think, that soul's doing the job that they're doing. And then sometimes you might feel that you can help people that you'd actually, from a human perspective, you don't like, because then you recognise that they are contributing to the overall evolution of everything. And actually, they may well be contributing towards your evolution as well, because as we interact with each other, we assist each other's learning, and we assist in each other's evolutionary progression. Well, I hope that's made a little bit of sense of it all. You've got to, one has to detach from the human condition to be able to see this, and it can be considered to be, sort of distant, but we have to be distant sometimes to appreciate the greater reality. That doesn't mean we don't experience things in a comprehensive way or in an in-depth way. It means that we understand that it's something we have to deal with and work with and do the best we can with. And that's the way forwards. Okay, so we've got a bunch of questions here from WP, FN, MO and AB. Okay, so let's go. So first questions, I think there's two questions here. Assuming that an aspect of our tests Assuming that as an aspect of our test we are not the mind, body or ego, but rather than an independent observer of those attributes, if we choose to do so. If we don't, the mind will rule our life, and we will call it fate, paraphrasing Carl Jung. Is this then the independent observer that is the aspect, and if so, have I categorised this correctly? So, as an aspect of our test, we are still an aspect of our test. We're still a soul. We're still an individualised unit of our test. We are not the mind, the body or the ego. The ego and the mind are a function of incarnation within a body. So in essence, we are an interactive observer, so to speak. And so we do interact with it. The issue is not to let the ego, the temporary thought process that occurs as a function of low frequency existence, rule us. So the best thing to do is to be the independent interactive observer, but not let the ego control us. Now the ego is something which is predominantly functional only within the physical environment, and so if we work with ego only, then we become immersed in our incarnation, and we work and think, behave and act as a human body, and we don't consider the wider environment, the greater reality. So again, if we can detach from being here, we can navigate through our incarnation in a detached way, not accruing karma, which is addiction to being here, addiction to sensory stimulus, addiction to status, addiction to material wealth, addiction to anything that is physical. Then we will actually be going a long way towards negating the need to incarnate again. Okay, so that's a good question. Yeah, so stay independently observing. Use the observer self. That's a real powerful tool to start to consider yourself not just as an individualized thing that is part of the human body, but more of a part of a bigger subset of sentience. Next question. When the body dies, I assume the mind and the ego go with it, but the independent observer does not. True? No, it's the other way around. The independent observer does go. So what about memory? If our purpose in the body is to experience, learn and evolve, all of that is only stored memory. So it must somehow be carried forward via one's memory while in the body. Is the memory a function of the mind, or is it a function of the observer whilst out of the body? What becomes the memory? The memory is the experience that is continuously observed and stored by the true energetic self. So everything we do as an individualized unit of sentience is stored by the true energetic self as a function of its connectivity with the source. So the source has a I'm going to call it repository of experiences that is relevant to our interaction in certain locations within the multiversal environment. And that means that there are certain experiences that our true energetic self maintains, and even the ego, even the temporary personality is maintained, but becomes part of a larger group of sort of personalities that we've accrued over thousands and thousands of incarnations. So it no longer becomes dominant, it becomes just part of it. So we don't lose our memories, we don't lose what we've experienced, or our particular oneness, so to speak, in part, or individualization has been in this particular incarnation, but it becomes just another drop in the ocean when we're integrated with our true energetic self. So everything goes into true energetic self. The source has an area within it which is dedicated to collecting all experiences. Yeah? If you think of it, it's within all of it. Although it's identified as being experiential knowledge, so to speak, and subsequent evolution. Certain parts of that are categorized. And so all the experiences that us as aspects or souls have on the earth, in the human body, are located in a certain location, or should we say categorized or labeled into something we now call the Akashic records. And there's other records for other physical forms that we incarnate into as well. And there's other locations for other things that we do in the energetic. So everything is ultimately stored by source as a function of the storage of the experiences, subsequent learning and evolution, accrued by the true energetic self as a function of its projection of smaller aspects of its sentience into various different environments. So everything is there. And when we go back into communion with our true energetic self, the experiences we've had in this particular incarnation just become one set of experiences in a vast sea of experiences. And we start to, as we go back into the energetic, we start to remember all of this. And so our experiences aren't limited to this particular incarnation, they become part of all of the experiences we've had. And all of the experiences that other aspects of sentience that have been projected into various different environments from our true energetic self have also had as well. So we become party to that. Okay, good questions there. Next couple of questions are very simple ones from FN. Are allergies caused by traumas? They're usually caused by past life traumas that have come through from previous incarnations that we've hung on to. So if it's a particularly difficult transition, for example, or difficult experiences that we've had difficulty in shifting or detaching from, then they can come through as a level of resistance to experience, and that can cause allergies. Okay, so it's the same thing with not wanting to be, or being frightened of spiders, or being frightened of snakes, or being frightened of animals. We may have been bitten by a snake and died. We may have been bitten by a dog and got rabies and died. These sorts of things. These are the things that could cause us to have certain allergies or certain fears. How we've departed from previous incarnations or experienced different things that we'd rather not experience in different incarnations, but have nevertheless contributed towards our evolutionary progression. Okay, next question. Is it correct that Jesus had higher frequency walk-ins after birth? I'm just going to ask that question because it doesn't feel right, actually. the incarnate aspect, who incarnated into the body that we call Jesus, was an evolved aspect anyway, and incarnated in a higher frequency way, and then was also educated in a higher frequency way as well whilst he was incarnate. So he didn't need any walk-ins. It was very, very connected in the first instance, and maintained that connectivity by being detached from the vagaries of standard incarnation. So when it reached a certain age, we all know that Jesus disappeared, and that's because he was being taught by a group of individuals who were still maintaining ways of becoming connected. They had various different processes and procedures via meditation that yogis have that enabled it to reconnect and maintain a high level of connectivity and frequency, and therefore creativity in its own right. And it knew once it understood how to interact with low frequency environments and other low frequency individuals, it then got to the point where it was self-sustaining, and it could move into the environment you're supposed to move into and do its work. Okay, so there was no additional walk-ins or no high frequency walk-ins. It was a self-contained, self-sustaining, very evolved soul. Okay, that was well trained. Well, we have to be well trained in low frequency environments to enable us to detach. Okay. Now, lots of questions from Mo. Mo is that wonderful lady who's translating the books into Japanese. Thank you very much for your hard work and your questions. Okay, this first question. White sage is often used for cleansing space and crystals. How effective is it? Would you explain how smoke can cleanse space and crystals frequently? Also, does the effectiveness of cleansing properties change depending upon the plants that are used to produce smoke? Certain herbs and trees are more effective than others. It's not the smoke that does the cleansing, it's the frequencies that are incurred as a function of smoke. So when we smudge, which is using sage, a room to help cleanse the energies, basically what we're doing is we're doing two things. One, we're introducing a change in frequential environment, or change to the frequential environment because of the smoking of the sage. Two, we're using our intention to cleanse the area. So we're using the sage in reality as a focal point for our own desire for a space to be frequentially pure, or to help a crystal become neutralized and reprogrammed. So there's a certain level of physical interactivity from a frequential perspective by the sage being burnt, but also it's the intention to clean, using the focus of the sage, that makes us clean the area ourselves. Okay, so it's really using a tool to help us focus on creating a clean space. Okay, in essence, we don't need it, but it's something that people need to have sometimes. We sometimes need to have a tool to say, oh, I'm using a physical tool to do this now, so it must be working. And that's what it is really. The advanced soul doesn't need it, it just cleans the area. The slightly less advanced soul might need something that's giving them proof that it's being cleaned, and burning the sage gives them physical proof. So, yeah, that's the answer to that question. Next question. It is often said that quartz crystals should be soaked in a bowl of salt water over a day to reset them. But I feel it is equally effective to put quartz crystals into a river in an ancient forest where there are lots of nature spirits for about half an hour. It feels that the crystals are fully cleansed and charged, but I'm not certain. Is this way of cleansing really resetting the crystals? If so, what is the mechanism behind it? Well, again, it's the intention, isn't it? Basically, it's using a function that you can relate to, which is physical. Putting the crystals into salt water, leaving them overnight, and sometimes on a full moon, in the moon shadow, so to speak, is a way of focusing our intention to cleanse that crystal. Taking them into an ancient woodland where there's a river flowing through it, for example, again uses a pure area. We're going into a higher frequency location that is assisting us in that instance. And again, the intention is to cleanse the crystal, and we're going through a physical process that we are using and we are convinced is a process that will cleanse the crystal. But in real terms, it's just our desire. Our desire, our intention, our thought and our action that is cleansing the crystal. Everything else is supplementary, really. It's just that we like to use physicality as a focus. And that's the same thing. So in terms of the mechanism of salt water, it's really something that we go through to prove to ourselves that we're doing it. In real terms, we don't need to. We just need to use our intention, or our desire, our intention, our thought and our action to cleanse the crystal and neutralise the crystal, and it'll be neutralised. So it's like everything else. They're like things like tarot cards, like dowsing rods, they're like pendulums, they're all these different things, they're all different focuses that we used as a physical focus to help us connect in a limited way with the functions that we've got, should we realise we've got those functions. Okay, next question. If the colours don't have an awful lot of an effect other than some of the colours do, this is the colour of crystals, we say that limit the function of a crystal's ability to work with certain frequencies. Then how about different locations? Do locations or origins of crystals affect their properties? Some people claim crystals from certain locations, such as the Alps and the Himalayas, have higher frequencies than others. That is only because of the lack of human interaction. A crystal that comes from an area where there's a lack of human interaction and is therefore in a more natural environment will be in a higher frequency environment, and therefore will be more useful instantaneously than one that's just been stuck in somebody's backyard. It's really about the location is a jump start, a kick start, if you want to call it that allows us to use certain crystals quicker. Okay, so really it's about, the Himalayas are quite pure because not many people live there. Same with the Alps, not many people live there. Human interaction is what lowers the frequencies of crystals, unless you're a higher frequency individual, in which case it's maintained. Okay, so it's about the overall frequential level of the location the crystals are brought in, or are dug up from, or are taken from. Okay, next question. Is there easy ways to be in the state of the observer self without self-criticism or ego? How are we able to look at some traumatic experiences which caused karma without complex emotions? Think of things in terms of watching a boring film. So if you think of things if you think of what you've experienced, what you've done as being a boring film, when you go over it, then you can detach from it. The emotions drop away, and we just see things for what it is. It's a film in the background that we're observing. Oh, and we've taken a part in it. And we can say, okay, I should have done that maybe a bit better this time, or next time I go into this particular type of scenario, I'll do that a bit better. And that's the best way to do it. It's just to realise that you've done it, it's done and dusted, and that it's not something you can affect while you're in this particular level of frequency, because it's now in a level of event space which we would classify as being the past. So just think of everything you've done as being a rather boring and not very interesting film, and therefore you can look at the film and say, okay, what could be improved with that film? And then you don't get into self-criticism, and you don't get an ego from if you think you've done something really, really well. It's just an interaction. In general, when people are moving around us and doing their daily things, we don't judge them, we don't criticise them, we don't think they're better than us or worse than us. They're in the background. They're driving their cars to work, they're going past us, they're walking past us in the street, they go into a shop, they're buying things. We don't judge them, we don't criticise them, they're just there, they're in the background. So just think of what you've done as being something that's been in the background, and then you can detach from it, and therefore you don't feel the emotional pull of doing this right or that wrong. Okay, I hope that helps. It is a difficult thing to be to be in the observer self is to be in the observer. And again, it's like, for me, it's like watching football. I'm not particularly a football fan, but it's just there. I don't experience joy or sadness associated with a team I would prefer to watch winning a game or losing a game. It doesn't matter to me. It's just observing, and that's the same thing with this. You're a passive observer, neutral observer, and the way to look at it is to just, well, okay, I can improve this if next time I experience it. Well, that's fine. But don't forget that everything you do, you've done to the best of your ability for that particular point in your existence. We can always do better afterwards, but we always do the best we can in that event space, in that point. Okay. So don't be hard on yourselves. Just be observant. Think of it as somebody else doing it, and then you can be non-critical, just neutrally observant. Next question: is there anything uncreated besides the as a result of the Origin's first experiment of recreating itself? If so, what sort of things are uncreated, or is the the original manifestation the general term or collective name for all uncreations? My understanding is, and this may well be limited, is that the are the only uncreated creations. Everything else had a purpose behind it. The were created as a function of, shall we say, reused or recycled sentience that wasn't reassigned away from being an origin. So rather than becoming a source entity and therefore being able to be individualized as other functions of source entity, it detached itself from the assignation of source entity because it saw itself as being origin, but also saw itself as being individualized. So that's why it became Okay, that's why they became individualized aspects of origin sentience rather than being individualized aspects of origin sentience that were assigned as being source entity. So my understanding is there's only the that are uncreated, because they weren't I'm not going to use the word physical, that's wrong. They weren't intentionally created as it just happened. So they're uncreated, basically. Maybe the word uncreation is wrong. They're a bit of an accident. That's another way of saying it. But I don't know if you could refer to these entities as being the accident. That might not go down so well. So just think of it as being a byproduct. They're a byproduct of the creativity process, where the energy, with the sentience and the energy that was used to create the source entities, wasn't reassigned properly. Let's put it that way. Next question. Question on event space. I experience different things every time I do the Satsanga meditation, in brackets, excluding connection with nature. Are we, in brackets, listeners, accessing the original event space, which is created by you, this is me, individually, and creating our new event spaces, forming clusters of event spaces? Our personal spiritual development and experience might increase depending upon our personal effort. So I'm wondering how we are using your original event space to advance ourselves. Oof. We create event spaces that interact with other event spaces. We can be within an event space, within an event space, within an event space, within an event space that's interacting with another event space. So event spaces are within and without each other. So we choose to enter into event space, but that event space we enter into also includes our own event space, localized event space. So if we think of it that way, you are choosing to enter into my event space, which is open to you all. But that event space that you choose to go into also has, as a component of it, your event space, the things that you're doing whilst you're also interacting with the event space by listening to the World Satsanga. So there are times when you will have a focus on something different, something different, which creates a different event space. And so your interaction with my event space will be slightly different as well. So every event space we interact with can be different, or it can be the same. So in this instance, next time we have a World Satsanga, use your intention to stay in the same event space during the listening of the World Satsanga for the first time, and then say you want to stay in the same event space that you had in the first time you listened to the Satsanga in the second time, and then do the same thing for the third time. And you can see that you'll be able to control your event spaces. Okay. If we just randomly move into an event space, then we take those aspects or components of that event space with us for that particular function of event space that we're working with. Okay. It's a bit complicated, but I think it answers the question. So we have another question here, and I think this is to do with the new origins. Okay, I have several questions on the new origins energies. I've modified the text a little bit because this refers to when all the source entities have gone through all of the different evolutionary cycles that is possibly available to them, whilst mapping out the current volume of the origins polyomniscient, omniscient, sentient self-awareness. So when the sentience that is the origin moves out of the first 12 levels of structure into the second 12 levels of structure, the source entities will have accrued by then a level of sentience that's equal to the origin now. So that they'll become like mini origins, but in the next level of structure. Next level of structure, or next level of 12 sets of structure, are significantly, in my understanding, significantly vaster in volume than the first 12, because everything increases by a function of 12, the power of 12. Okay, every level we go up, it increases by the power of 12. So for the origin to be able to map that out on its own, even with its own inflated level of sentience, when it moves into its next level of structure, when all the evolutionary cycles have been completed, but not only by itself, but by its source entity and by the source entity's individualizations of sentience, which in our source entity's case is our true energetic selves and ultimately us. Breathe in. Then it would need help. So the source entities will have accrued enough sentience, as I said before, to become sort of the same as the origin is now, but within the overall structure or energies that is the ever-expanding origin, basically. So they will move into that next level to map it out. There'll be no need to stay in the first level, the first set of 12. That's understood. That is polyomniscient. Okay, that is omnipresent. Sentience will be fully occupying that area. So the next bit needs to be populated. So they will move into the next level with the origin, and the process starts again. Next question, have they ever interfered? Well, they're not in existence yet. Well, maybe they are in existence, because everything happens concurrently, doesn't it? So have they ever interfered with and ruined the origins and other source sensitive experiments, or caused any trouble? No. Everything is, there's no ruining or interfering of anything. Everything is experience. Even if an entity is doing exactly the same as another entity, it's being considered from a different perspective, or doubling up, or creating a level of deeper depth on what is being experienced, and therefore the subsequent evolutionary progression that's being created from it. So there's never any condition where there's interference or ruining of certain experiments or levels of or aspects of creativity that are being used to experience, learn and evolve. Would you ask the origin how the other origins energies are doing and where they are now? Okay, this is really for the next book, Beyond the Origin, which is not really beyond the origin, but it's beyond the origin's existing 12 levels of structure. But I'm seeing them all, relatively speaking, close to each other. It's like they're ruminating, which is like discussing or considering or conjecturing. but it seems like they're all experiencing in a location that seems to be quite small from my observational position, but is actually an unfathomably vast distance. You know, you can't even it's can't even be classified in terms of, you know, X number of volumes of universal volume. It's just massive, but it looks small from what I'm seeing here. But it's uncalculably large, the distances between them. But from my position, they're just experiencing those areas and just getting on with it. Okay. And within those origins are the new source entities, which are our true energetic selves. So each of those origins have got their own subset of sentience, which is the sentience that has, if you like, evolved beyond true energetic self into source entity level, but are within those origins, those new origins. Okay. Next one. Is the origin unable to predict and catch the new origin's energies to this day? Oh. Okay. Is the origin unable to predict and catch the new origin's energies to this day, even with the use of event spaces? Or it gave up long ago, never tried? It doesn't need to. It realises that everything that is experienced, it can experience as well. So even though there is, shall we say, individualisations of sentience, that individualisation of sentience will eventually become part of the overall volume of sentience, that is the origin, in its ever increasing volume. So it doesn't matter about whether it catches it. It does not bother about catching it or compartmentalising it. It's letting it do its own thing, because eventually it'll become absorbed anyway. So there's no need for it to worry about, you know, stray sentience that may well evolve naturally using the Darwinian evolution of energies. It just recognises that these things happen, but it being the dominant sentience and being supported by event space in that it will eventually absorb it anyway, and all of the experiences associated with it. Okay, good questions, though, very good questions. Okay, next question is from AB, and this is probably a bit more down to earth, I think, maybe. You say that we're here to experience, learn and evolve, and that we are here on our own accord on behalf of Source. But it feels more like what the Eastern religions say, that we are stuck on the wheel of samsara. We got stuck here by accident, and that we have to tirelessly struggle to get out of it. Which is right? Do we choose to keep coming here, or are we continuously being banished from the garden? Well, the religions were using old language and old levels and limited levels of thought process to be able to explain certain things. But in essence, they're both right. The issue is that when we wanted to encounter or work with the lowest lower frequencies, we also encountered addiction, karma. And once we become addicted to experiencing low frequency existences, such as being in the human body and experiencing sensory pleasures, you know, different types of foods. We can get addicted to food, we can get addicted to alcohol, we can get addicted to drugs, we get addicted to material wealth, you know, belongings, money, status. These are the things that cause us to come back, because we need to work it out. We need to move beyond the addictions. We need to navigate through incarnation by being in the physical but not being of it. By not being addicted to wanting to be a certain type of individual, by having a certain job, by having certain amounts of money, by having certain belongings, by having status. Just experiencing the incarnation, doing the job and getting out. So the wheel of samsara is really us having to become unaddicted, to go through karmic cold turkey, if you want to call it that. And once we've gone through karmic cold turkey and we've no longer addicted to accruing karma by wanting to have material belongings or demanding to come here so we can experience physical sensory pleasures, etc., then we will have moved on from the wheel of samsara. But on top of that, we'll also have experienced, learned and evolved beyond the need to be here as well. So they're both right. And we need to sort of realise that the one is an old way of explaining it, whereas the other one is a new way of explaining it. But in essence, they both allow us to understand that we're here to experience, learn and evolve in a detached way. That means we don't accrue addictions, we don't accrue karma. We don't get stuck on the wheel of samsara, which is the karmic wheel basically. And the karmic wheel is, having to come here to work out karma, to experience certain things and not get addicted to them, or attracted to them, or desire them, or demand them, or want to be in them, so to speak. And then so this ability to navigate through an incarnation in a non-karmic way, by being in the physical but not of the physical, is the ultimate goal, really, because then we'll have experienced, learnt and evolved and move on. Well, I hope that answers that particular question. So it's a good question, very good question, but we have to remember that some of the old religions, well, all the old religions, were teaching things to people who hadn't got the education or the understanding or the expansivity we've got now, or even think in a higher frequency way that we've got now. So they had to use very simple terminology to help them understand. And that was the same with the incarnate aspect we call Jesus. He used parables, Patanjali used the Vedas. All of these different things we use to explain complicated things in a simple way that the average individual could understand. Okay, so that's the last of the questions. I'm just going to go back to the meditation now, which is to feel the oneness within each other. Okay, so we understand that we are all one. So let's sit in our straight-backed chair. I've got a rather creaky straight-backed chair. I think I need to get a new one, it's falling apart. But whilst I can sit on it, it's useful. Okay, I don't need to have a new chair. Having a new chair might be something that is unnecessary. So I like to use things until they fall apart. Okay. So just sit in your straight-backed chair, feet flat on the ground, hands palm uppermost on the interface of your upper legs, on the lower body, in the area of the thighs. Close your eyes. Gently focus on the origin of the spiritual or third eye, which is in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. Okay, just relax. And I want you just to observe yourself from a detached perspective for the moment. Just consider everything you've experienced in this incarnation. What you've done, how you've struggled through it, what you've achieved, what you may have failed at, but experienced nevertheless, what you've only done halfway through and then stopped and moved on to something else, is all part of your experience. Everything you've done to date has brought you to this place that you're in now. Your level of sentience, your level of understanding, your material position, everything is in effect a result of what you've done over this incarnation. Now I want you to just consider a few people around you. It could be family, it could be friends, it could be work colleagues, it can be enemies, it doesn't matter. Don't forget, we don't really have any friends or enemies, we just have other souls that are also struggling through their incarnation. And then look at these souls and sort of realise that some of them have interacted with us and we've benefited from their interaction. And that interaction means that we've both experienced something and both grown. Or numbers of us have grown as a result of it. And so that knowledge, that experience has been shared, has been collectively shared by you and them, or us and them. But that sharing of knowledge has been individualized by our own perception or perspective on that experience. This gives diversity of experience, depth of knowledge, quality of evolutionary progression, along with depth of evolutionary progression. That depth of evolutionary progression is shared by us all. So if we're sharing, if we're sharing experience, sharing knowledge, sharing evolutionary progression, it's because we are all one in the first place. How many times do you go onto YouTube to see how a couple of people have done something that you've not done before? How many times do you take a quick lesson in doing this or that, changing a battery in a watch, servicing your car, trimming a bonsai tree? If you've not done it before, you can now go onto the internet and see how somebody else has done it. And you might see 3 or 4 different people who've done it in slightly different ways to get a bigger picture. They're sharing their experience with us. And later we might do the same thing with other people. We talk about it to somebody, don't we? Oh, I've done this today. I've done that today. This is how I did it. We're pleased about what we've done. And in expressing our pleasure in what we've done, we share our knowledge. And then our knowledge is understood and shared by the person we've conveyed it to. So we've taken knowledge from somebody else by using a different medium. We've used that knowledge and we've passed it on to somebody else by expressing how pleased we are we've done it. So that knowledge base links us all together. The person or persons we've never met before, by looking at their YouTube video as an example, and then the close friend or the colleague or the family member that you've shared your experience with in doing what you've done yourself as a function of taking the advice of that other individual, the supposed expert, who showed you how to do what you couldn't do before. Of course, this also is relevant to people who go on training courses, or schools, or universities, or colleges. Everything is shared. And if everything is shared, it's because we're all interacting with each other. And if we're all interacting with each other, then we're all one. Everything and everyone is linked together. Every time you bump into somebody, you think, oh, I've met you somewhere before. It's because you have. In the energetic, or maybe in a different incarnation. In the energetic, we know we're all one. We know we're all individualized units of a larger volume of sentience, which is a smaller individualized unit of a much bigger, larger unit of sentience. See everyone, not as their human body, but as the soul animating the body to experience, learn and evolve. But that individuality of sentience is ultimately part of a bigger unit of sentience, and that we're all individualized units of a bigger body of sentience, and so therefore we are that big body of sentience. And so when we realise that we're all part of a bigger body of sentience, that we're all really one, that your enemy is you and that you are your enemy, that your friend is you and that you are your friend, that your parents are you and that you are your parents, that you are your partner and your partner is you. It's just that this little bit of sentience is doing something slightly different to add towards the collection, the collective sentience that is desiring to experience, learn and evolve by interacting with the very minute aspects of a multiversal environment. And interacting with those environments that make up the multiverse in the most profound way possible by becoming part of that environment, albeit in several temporary ways and methods. Everybody is us and we are everybody. So when you see somebody that you don't like, what aspects of them don't you like? Because that aspect of them that you don't like is you. So, and the aspect of somebody else that you do like is also you. And that aspect of somebody else that you're fairly ambivalent about or neutral about is also you. So just be aware, considerate, calm, collected. Try not to get frustrated when somebody doesn't understand what you're talking about. Try to understand their position, because that is part of being here, to recognise that we're all one and that we're all contributing to ourselves. We're contributing to other individualised aspects of sentience, progression, and they're contributing towards ours. We don't have brothers or sisters, fathers or mothers, daughters, sons, friends or enemies, acquaintances or work colleagues. They're just us doing something different. And if they're just us doing something different, we should love ourselves and those things that we're doing differently. And be grateful for the diversity of experience that we do in a minor, temporary, individualised way at times, whilst incarnate. Think of all of these different entities incarnate on the earth as us multitasking. We are multitasking. Everything is us. There is no separation in reality. There is no individualization in reality. There is only us doing things in myriad ways concurrently. Just wait here and just meditate on this a moment. You don't need to think about it. Just feel. Everything, everyone you see is you. A little bit of you doing something else in a different way. Okay, so slowly come back into the room. You can do this on your own if you want to, extend it. It doesn't have to be 15 minutes or 10 minutes. You can do half an hour or an hour if you want to. And just really feel everybody. Feel everybody around you and just know that they're you. And you're them. The personality that we interact with is simply transient. It's allowing that bit of you to interact with a different environment in a different way. Everything is us. Everyone is us. And we're them. So slowly come back into the room, slowly open your eyes. If you've got any water or the liquid to help ground you, do so. And I invite you all to just do this meditation several times. Actually, do it over the next week, at least once a day, and you'll feel the difference in how you interact with other individuals. It'll make a massive difference. And then share it with other people. Okay, so that's June's Satsanga. We are also looking forward to July's Satsanga. I'm just going to look at the calendar to find out when July's Satsanga is. And it's on the 31st, the very end, 31st of July. So looking forward to interacting with you again energetically. And thank you very much for listening to that Satsanga and passing it on. And as one of you and you're one of me, I send my love to you all, and Source sent its love to you all as well. And Namaste. God's love to you all. Did you see the aliens in Crete?